Jesus is created. What? Yeah, John 1:14, the Word became flesh. Flesh is created, right? I see what happened there. The humanity of Jesus absolutely is created, and so Jesus entered into creation when he became flesh. However, many will argue that his divine nature, that is, the nature he possessed in his pre-human existence, was also created. And one of the texts used for this is Colossians 1:15. If we look in the 2013 edition of the New World Translation from Jehovah's Witnesses, it says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation." Firstborn is here taken to mean the first created thing. But is that the intention? And how can we know for sure what the meaning is? To begin with, we have to acknowledge that firstborn has two basic meanings. The one is the first one born, and the other is preeminent. Notice what it says in Bauer, Danker, Ardent, and Gingrich, a Greek-English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature, 3rd edition. On the term prototokos, the first definition is pertaining to birth order, firstborn. But definition 2 says pertaining to having special status associated with a firstborn. It is this latter definition that they categorize Colossians 1:15 in. In other words, he is preeminent. This is certainly the meaning in Psalm 89:27, where it says, "I shall make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth." So even if firstborn means preeminent, what about the whole expression, firstborn of all creation? Daniel Wallace, in his work Exegetical Syntax, notes, though some regard this genitive to be partitive, thus firstborn who is part of creation, both due to the lexical field of firstborn, including preeminent over and not just a literal chronological birth order, and the following clause for hati, in him all things were created, which makes little sense if mere chronological order is in view. It is far more likely that this expresses subordination. Wallace thus argues for a genitive of subordination, and this is reflected in the New International Version of the Bible, where it says he is the firstborn over all creation. However, it is not necessarily the case that this is the right view of the genitive. Given how firstborn is used all throughout Scripture, including in the Septuagint, it is much more likely that Christ is here included as part of creation. In other words, he is a member of it because, as we already considered, he entered into creation. But the question is why is he the firstborn of all creation? And Wallace pointed out that in the very next verse, which is a continuation of the same sentence in verse 15, it says for, or hati, because, as in the New World Translation. And this defines for us why he is the firstborn of all creation. Were the meaning that he has mere temporal priority, in other words, he is the first of creation in time, then we would expect it to say something like, he is the firstborn of all creation because God created him first. But that's not what we find. Let's notice again the New World Translation and how it renders the text. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, because by means of him all other things were created. It makes little sense to say that Jesus is the first of all creation because all things were created by means of him. Rather, it makes a great deal of sense to say that he is the preeminent of creation because all things were created by means of him. If Jesus is created first, the reason he's created first is because God created him before all other things. That's not what we're told. We're told he is firstborn because of the action he took. In other words, because by means of him, all things were created. So as A.S. Peake says in verse 16, Paul now gives the ground for the designation of the Son as prototokos passes katisios. In summary, yes, Jesus did enter into creation. His deity is not created, but his humanity is. As such, he is the preeminent one of all that is created, for he is both created and eternal. The reason he is the preeminent of all creation is because all things have been created in, by, through, and for him, as we see in Colossians 1:16.